Let's get on. Okay, good evening, and particularly to those on YouTube. Can you hear us and all, Ken?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So welcome to this special meeting of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We have only the one item on the agenda, which is the call-in in relation to the Grosvenor Centre and Belgrave House agreement. But before we get on to that, apologies for absence. Richard? Tracy?
Johnny. Councillor Pritchard is here remotely as speaking as a councillor, not as a committee member.
Yes, yeah, Ken phoned me earlier, so I know about that. Any declarations of interest? Nothing. The minutes of the meeting of the 12th of October have been circulated with these ones. So can I just ask members, is there anything on page 5, 6, which begins minutes and finishes 1.9 million individuals? Page 7, which begins the committee felt that and finishes by responses to the committee's questions and comments were detailed. Page 8, which begins with the revenue and benefits update and finishes with issues are being fully addressed. And then page 9, which begins the post of benefits manager and finishes with performance against its approved 24-25 budget. Page 10, which begins the cabinet member for finance highlighted and finishes by the next meeting will be the 27th of January 25. And then page 11, which is just really got the signature areas on it. So are you content that that is a true record? And you're happy that I signed them as such? January. Thank you, Tracy. So, the next item, chair's announcements. The only announcement that I have is just really around how I intend to take this, which is to take, I think we're having a presentation from Simon first. Then I'll take the comments from Wendy, who was the lead member on the call-in. And I know that Ken and Jonathan both wish to speak, and Sally. And then we'll ask members to have our own thoughts and discussions. I don't particularly intend to time limit things, but at the same time, I do want to get home. So we'll try and get a happy balance between those two things. So are we starting with Simon then, Richard?
Thank you, Chair. So if I can go to the background slide, please. We are responding this evening to a call-in of a cabinet decision regarding a proposed series of deals relating to Belgrave House and the Grosvenor Centre in Northampton. By way of background, the council has a major programme of work to regenerate central Northampton, which includes the Market Square scheme, which is just reaching its conclusion. Apologies. The Market Square scheme, which is just reaching its conclusion, Abingdon Street, where again work is well underway, Fish Street, Four Waterside, where the development agreement is approaching its conclusion, and so on. So a lot of activity. But probably the next major scheme is Greyfriars. This is a huge area of brownfield land just to the side of the current town centre. It's the largest council-owned regeneration opportunity in England, which is saying something. There's a master plan in place, as you will all know well, and there is an agreement in place with the English Cities Fund, which is a major regeneration partnership, including Homes England. And whilst, of course, having Homes England in the partnership doesn't guarantee access to government grants, shall we say, it doesn't hurt either. It really is a once in a generation opportunity to regenerate the entire area, make a real difference to the centre of Northampton and therefore to West Northamptonshire as a whole. Now, the Grosvenor Centre and Belgrave House are key to making all of this work. There needs to be a new life for Belgrave House, which is currently sitting vacant and, as we'll see later, is said to be looming over the Greyfriars site. We need better connections between Market Square and Greyfriars, and we need greater footfall, activity and vibrancy, all of which can be delivered through these arrangements. Belgrave House is currently locked up with a highly restrictive lease, and that effectively makes delivery of the scheme impossible. Therefore, the proposed deal has been come to, which also delivers a series of wider benefits to Northampton. Just by way of context, this is, if we can move on to the next slide, this is the Greyfriars opportunity area as it's defined. The dashed red line, which indicates the boundary, is a bit hard to see, to be fair, but you can see it includes the Marehold multi-storey car park, it includes the bus station, it includes the Corn Exchange, it includes Belgrave House, and so on. So the sites we're talking about this evening are part of that Greyfriars vision. So just to give a bit more context, there are, as all set out in the committee report, 6 agreements forming one commercial deal. Agreement A is the renewable energy letter, under which we gain assurance that we can put renewable energy equipment on the Grosvenor multi-storey without contest or more to the point, expectation that we'll pay money for the privilege. Agreement B is a loan to Northampton General Partner Limited, the tenant, for £2 million for fit out of the proposed H&M unit. Agreement C is very similar for the proposed Wizzo flexible office space. Agreement D, provision of 2 hours free parking for up to 180 users of the proposed leisure unit in the former Sainsbury's space. Agreement E relates to the micro shops, which are a real opportunity to deliver something new and exciting in Northampton. We put in 375k as a 50% contribution, and we get 50% of the net income for 10 years thereafter. And Agreement F, to some degree for us, is obviously the master stroke for all of it. This is the replacement lease for Belgrave House that gives WNC almost complete control over how to use it, what to do with it, and also extends the airspace around the lease that helps us sort out the less than exciting cladding it currently has. If we move on again, we've just provided here an extract from the Constitution, picking up the decision-making principles that are quoted in the call-in request. So they are there to reference. I don't think I need to read them out. So having said that, I'll move on. And what we've done in each case is pull the part of the objection, the 8 objections in the call-in request, into the yellow box, and then there's a response beneath it, just so that format flows through. So the first objection is concerned about efficient and effective use of resources and proportionality. And effectively, this comes down to a judgment call, but a judgment call which Cabinet was entitled to make and did make on the basis of good evidence. Effectively, you have to consider what the alternative options are. Now, we could clearly do nothing and just leave Belgrave House as is, but that would severely impair the Greyfriars regeneration. It would leave us with a substantial and growing maintenance liability and wouldn't do anything to enhance the vitality or vibrancy of Northampton Town Centre. We could have said to Evolve, the owners, okay, well, how much money do you want to buy out these lease terms? And there would have been a sum that they would accept. It would have been a fairly large sum, I think, because they are strictly commercial. But it would have given no collateral benefit. So we would have had to pay out a significant amount of money purely to liberate the lease without getting any broader benefits for the community. Or there's the proposed deal. And of that, we're only actually spending 375k, which I say only, I appreciate that feels like a lot of money on an individual level, but for the council, it isn't a large amount of money. And it is set against 10 years of income from the micro shops, which should, if all goes well, pay it back. So effectively, there is no net cost to the authority from doing these deals. So overall, we believe that makes it a very good deal. It's well worth taking for both the direct and the indirect benefits, which include enhanced footfall, reduction in vacancies, and increased opportunities for new and existing businesses to operate in the area. So overall, the suggestion is objection 1, it is not sustained in that there are perfectly good reasons and proportionate reasons for carrying out the action proposed. We then turn to objection 2. Now, I'm conscious part of that's hidden on the screen. Presumably that's not a problem for our viewers, if there are any. No, okay. Objection 2 is about lending money to global corporations like H&M. Now, this is, to some degree, simply a misunderstanding. The report is quite clear. There is no loan to H&M. The only loans that are proposed are to the head tenant of the Grosvenor Centre, not to any other entity. And the loan is a necessary part of the overall deal. It's the way we get what it is the council needs out of this transaction. It helps deliver the Greyfriars redevelopment, obviously, which doesn't work with a dead office block on one side of it. And of course, it's subject to final legal and finance review, and the Chief Finance Officer, who is sitting here this evening, has to sign off the final arrangements. We move to objection 3. Talks about the low rate, which could be seen as a subsidy and maybe subject to regulations about state aid. And there's no state aid paragraph in the report. And this is said to be a contravention of Principle K, which is about openness and transparency. However, this is based on a mistake, effectively. State aid has been abolished as a concept in English law. It only relates to Northern Ireland. It certainly doesn't relate to England. And that is a feature of the UK's departure from the European Union and our subsequent agreement with the European Union. So there is a replacement regime. It's called subsidy control, and it's embedded in the Subsidy Control Act. And that is expressly referenced in the report. And the balance one has to strike, the fact that it is considered that the overall package is not a subsidy because we're doing what a private market operator would do, is expressly stated at multiple times in the report, as it's explained. So there's absolutely no problem with transparency here. The report is crystal clear what the issues are. It sets them out in detail and explains why it is considered subsidy and no subsidy is being given. Again, obviously subject to final sign-off of those arrangements, but that is our view as things stand. In terms of objection 4, thank you. In terms of objection 4, this talks about the need for a business case. And that a business case, absolutely. But it is set out in the report. And again, we've cited a series of paragraph numbers there that talk about the reason for the loans. They're there to secure the freedom to use Belgrave House and also free ourselves from the long-term financial implications of sitting on a vacant and decaying building. The key benefit is the freedom to use Belgrave House as the council sees fit, including for the Greyfriars regeneration scheme. And the other benefits are set out in the report: increased town centre activity through the uses enabled H&M, leisure operator, and so on. It will make a transformational difference to Northampton Town Centre. And of course, again, final sign-off subject to legal and financial review and the CFO's approval. Objection 5 talks about the microshops agreement. And I have to be honest, we struggled a little bit to understand what the concern was here, because it says it is proposed that WNC pay the contractors directly with provisions outlined to ensure no commissions are paid to them by them to NGPL. NGPL is, of course, Northampton General Partner Limited, the tenant. So it says that there are suitable protections in place, in which case not clear what the issue is. But in any case, as far as we understand it, the proposed agreement allows, it doesn't require, but it allows WNC to pay contractors directly. And there's a very straightforward reason for that. It's a means of making sure the money ends up where it is supposed to be. It's no secret to anyone that there were deals done in the past in this area where the money did not end up in the hands of the construction contractor. This arrangement makes sure that it does. It may not be essential, but it's there and it gives us that protection. The report sets out one of the preconditions to any money passing over is that there is a professional contract administrator with a duty of care towards the council, which means that they are certifying the work has been done, the money is properly due, and then we make the payment. If they, of course, have misled us in some way, they are then liable to us. That's the purpose of the duty of care. So we can go after them as well as after anyone who otherwise had been involved. So therefore, if the concern was that NGPL would somehow sort of cream off money that was being paid, that simply isn't possible in the arrangements as constructed. Option 6 talk about no heads of terms on the low agreements to show security and ensure repayment in contravention of Principle C. Now, Principle C is about compliance with the budget and policy framework and so on. Now, the report gives a detailed description of the key terms. It also explains again that the Chief Finance Officer, the Executive Director of Finance, has to sign off the final version of the legal documentation to make sure the Council's money is adequately secured. The objection doesn't actually say what breach of Principle C is involved. We don't believe there is any breach of the policy or budget framework, the budget or policy framework, my apologies. And Cabinet has had ample information to take on which to take its decision, including why the action is needed, why the arrangement proposed, the key terms of each agreement, the conditions to be met if each agreement was to be triggered, and the arrangements for protection of the Council's money. So given all of that, we don't think there's really any relevance in this objection. If we turn to objection 7, this says that the Belgrave House proposal for key worker accommodation is being quietly dropped with no alternative in place. Well, let's struggle with this one because the report isn't quiet, it's explicit. It asked Cabinet to acknowledge that this was the case, and Cabinet in its decision explicitly took a decision to acknowledge that. So that's the opposite of quiet, it's explicit and direct. Moreover, there is an existing Cabinet-approved alternative scheme for Belgrave House. It was approved by Cabinet in October, and I'll turn to the next slide in a second, but there is a detailed plan approved by Cabinet that is current Council policy. So there is a clear and approved alternative in place. There is nothing like secrecy here, absolute transparency and openness. If we turn to the next slide, I won't read it all out, you don't need to do that, but the October 2024 Cabinet report relating to the English Cities Fund appointment sets out a really clear description for what Belgrave House is intended to be, and that clearly is not compatible with the existing key worker housing use. So we're simply tidying up in this report and making sure that the links are made and the financial bits are in the right place. So you can see there it talks about flexible and affordable workspace and things like that. If we turn to objection 8, this talks about the solar panel installation. Again, a little bit difficult to work out what was the sort of challenge here, but I think it was saying effectively there are costs of this agreement and therefore the solar scheme might be less financially viable as a result. But in practice, this scheme doesn't really have any costs and certainly not to relate to the solar scheme. As we've said, the loans will be repaid with interest, so there's no loss there. The money for the micro shops gets repaid and so on. So the report sets all this out. There's nothing really to be concerned about. But the solar scheme itself will come forward, or indeed any other renewable energy scheme, with its own business case at the right time, and Council will consider that and make a judgment on whether it wishes to proceed with it in the normal way. What this agreement does do is gives us flexibility for the future. We are free to use the car park for renewable energy at any point in the future, not just currently. And Principle L, which is quoted here, deals with the clarity of desired aims and outcomes. And the report's entirely clear what it is we're seeking to achieve. I think it would be very hard to say otherwise. So then, if we move on to the alternatives, the first alternative which is suggested is not to enter into the agreement. And the first thing to say is that that is an option presented in the report. So it's not a new alternative. It's not something Cabinet didn't have in front of it. But if we didn't enter into the agreement, it could either mean that we sit, as we've talked about before, on a significant holding cost, we are unable to deliver the Greyfriars Master Plan, and we don't get any of the allied benefits, or we'd need to negotiate and pay significant monies to free up the lease, still without gaining the other benefits. And it's hard to see how that would be attractive. In either case, we lose from the benefits of proceeding, which include the new H&M store, bringing the former Sainsbury's unit back into use and creating opportunities for new businesses to operate in the town centre. All of that is lost if we don't enter into the new agreement. Alternative 2 asks us to clarify the position with regard to state aid, and I think to the extent there was any doubt, I've done that. State aid is simply not an issue. State aid, the legal regime was abolished, and we have the subsidy control regime, which is addressed in detail in the report. And just to be absolutely clear, no loan to H&M is or was proposed. The only loan is to NGPL, the tenant. Alternative 3 talks about clarifying the position with regard to commissions. This is understood to be a reference to the concern about payments being made directly to the contractors, and I think I've already dealt with that. There is really no prospect of that producing any kind of kickback or creaming off in favour of Evolve or NGPL. And the final alternative is not to loan money to all the parties listed. Now, the report only proposed and council only decided to loan money to one party, NGPL. The report was clear, no loans were proposed to either H&M or Wizoo, and therefore this alternative is exactly the same as alternative 1, not to do the deal, and therefore it's not recommended for the same reasons. So to conclude, the report provided all the information needed for Cabinet to take an informed decision. There were no breaches of the Council's decision-making principles in the report or in the decision. And overall, the proposals deliver the Council a great package, and even the things which could be seen as a cost or a risk, loans and so on, they all deliver worthwhile benefits to the area, notably to the vibrancy and success of Northampton Town Centre. So it's recommended, therefore, that the committee decides to take no further action. Now, that means the original Cabinet decision runs immediately, but of course, the due diligence, the sign-off arrangements that were embedded in that decision still apply. So I'll end there, Chairman. Very happy to take any questions.
Right, okay, thank you. I think it would have been better to let Wendy go first, but nonetheless, Wendy, it doesn't really matter because it was all printed out. So although I would say I would have thought that that presentation should have come from the portfolio holder rather than an officer, because this was review of a Cabinet decision. But Wendy, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're correct. It would have been useful to have that beforehand. Obviously, when that did come before Cabinet, as we're in opposition and we're not involved in all of those discussions, we've got 7 days to read through those papers and understand fully what they mean. They are not easy to read papers. I've often said this, the public don't, it's not easy to read for us, let alone the public. But when you pick out certain things for those reports, so if you go, and you haven't actually covered any of the risks either, but if you go to the bits that I really want to focus on is the £2 million loan and the free parking spaces. So if you go to 5.19, it says agreement, H&M agreement. So then what it does say is that we would loan up to £2 million, and it effectively says so that H&M will move into the Grosvenor Centre. Now, I haven't seen any statistics that tell me that by moving H&M from Abington Street into the Grosvenor Centre will significantly increase our footfall and boost the economy for the town. It also states, I'm sure in that report somewhere, that they would get that loan at the same rate that we get it, and we get it at a good rate. So I don't understand why we would get a loan on their behalf. Why don't they just go and get their own loan to bring people into their shopping centre? So that was the one. And all over social media, pretty much everybody is asking the same sort of questions. So for me, it's very important that, you know, we are dealing with, you know, residents' money here, that we have got to make sure and question and scrutinise that every decision that's being made is being made for the public interest. So then we move on to the parking spaces. Now, if we roll back to last year, Mark Mullen from Northampton Bid was requesting some free parking or not to increase the parking charges in the Grosvenor Centre, which was turned down by Cabinet, and those increases came about. And now you are asking for free places for leisure. Why, if somebody's going to go to a gym and come and park for free for 2 hours, what is that any difference to a shopper coming in and parking free for 2 hours? Because they are much more likely to be spending their money in those shops and helping those shops survive than somebody actually going to a gym. So I am absolutely, if you're going to offer free parking to gym users, you offer free parking for up to 2 hours for everybody coming into that car park. So they are my main two issues, because they are the main two issues that have been picked up on social media and at the forefront of what people are really concerned about. So I will leave it there, because I know there'll be other questions from others and they may pick up on other points.
Okay,
Thank you.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair. If you'll indulge me with my slight minor rant initially.
Go for it.
I think it's important for me to make it clear that I'm speaking tonight not as a member of this committee, as I was a co-signatory of the call-in itself. I've had lengthy discussions with the monitoring officer about this, and I'm afraid I still have the same position that, you know, the line that I'm not on the committee tonight is because many authorities do not normally allow committee members to sign a call-in and vote on it. Our constitution, as it currently is written, does not make that explicitly clear. And I don't believe it's anything that we've been specifically briefed on. Sarah and I have had that conversation, but I want to repeat it tonight. So I'm not entirely content about that outcome. But I have to say I take my responsibilities seriously. And in the light of that, I've decided not to sit on the committee tonight. I don't want to be accused of any predetermination, but it's important to remember that predetermination is based solely on the call-in and not anything to do with the cabinet decision, because this committee does not have those powers. This committee only has the powers to either effectively nod this through or refer it back to cabinet for decision, which is where the decision sits. So I wanted to put that out there and get that on record. The second bit, just briefly on that, this clearly makes it extremely difficult for smaller groups at council. If you sit on a committee, it's very difficult to get substitutions if there are a smaller number of you, particularly if they sign the call-in also. And again, I have asked if the monitoring officer can take a look at that. I want to just add that I think that issue could be compounded when we arrive at a situation where we have single-member wards. Not necessarily on these committees, but certainly on planning committees in the future. I always take the view that on planning terms, if a call-in is made, it's on behalf of the parish council, not necessarily because I may have a decision one way or the other. I don't sit on any committees planning-wise at the moment, so it makes no odds. But in the future, it could for anybody who's a single-member ward. And I really think we need to get to grips with that fundamentally. So to the matter in hand. Firstly, thank you for the responses from the officer on this issue. Again, I think it would have been very helpful if the information had been circulated ahead of this meeting rather than turning up to present it as you have. Useful information and has clarified some points, but it would have been useful to have had it in front. Normally, if we have any papers come forward at a committee, whether you are sitting on the committee or whether you're turning up to speak as a councillor, you would get sight of the responses. So it's a little disappointing that we didn't. So I signed this call in because I wanted this committee to have the opportunity to consider the decision for its own path. Clearly, it doesn't make the overriding decision, but I felt it was appropriate for this committee to have a second opportunity and a look at this. The confirmation around the issues on competition is particularly useful. I'm not clear on what legislation has replaced the EU legislation or what sits now, but I still think there is an underlying issue or theme, regulatory or not, that we need to think about in the context of this particular issue. So there have been numerous instances in the town centre where retailers have left or landlords have decided they can no longer host retailers for whatever reason. And to the best of my knowledge, we've never offered them any incentives to stay. That seems to me is slightly inequitable. We've seen lots of retailers leave the town centre. Wendy made this point earlier on. This is a commercial venture that we're discussing. And I struggle to understand why those requesting the loan are not able to raise funds that they need to through other commercial means. I understand that other town centre schemes may potentially be in the future looking to secure loans for their schemes also, some of those that are already on the table. So as I say, legislation or not, we are opening ourselves up, I believe, to setting a precedent. We'll open the floodgates potentially. And again, if these are commercially viable redevelopment schemes, why are they not able to raise the funds themselves through normal means? It appears that we're prepared to take that risk on potentially, and I hear what Simon says, no risk as far as he's concerned, but it does make me question why we cannot commercially raise funds for some of these schemes that we're proposing in the town centre regeneration. And it makes me question the viability of some of these schemes. It sort of feels a bit like we could become sort of a modern version of the Bank of Mum and Dad, but for commercial enterprise. The other issue I have fundamentally is, to my knowledge, what have we done to encourage regeneration in our market towns? Now, I know that we have a lot of funds that come into Northampton Town Centre that are grant funded for specific reasons, and they have to be utilised in that area. But if you take other market towns, we have similar problems. Some of those towns are struggling to get shops occupied. What incentives do we offer to them? If you take Daventry with the future plan, they've effectively been told you can have your town redevelopment, but only if we can sell off the open space that you've got in the town and build houses on it. It just strikes me as, again, we're seeing a very strong Northampton-centric focus, and we forget multiple times that we have many people who don't look to Northampton in West Northamptonshire. They look outwards because we border so many other territories. Now, capital's not free, and loaning funds to lead tenants, I've heard you describe it's not H&M, it's a lead tenant, means that's capital that potentially we don't have to use elsewhere. With regards to Belgrave House, it's my understanding that Northampton Borough Council signed a long lease on that 1 week before vesting day. How on earth did any council allow that to happen? And it feels a bit like we are going back to fix some of the problems of our previous sovereign councils. Now, I know that's history, but it's history that people need to understand, because fundamentally, there were some terrible decisions made, even in that very close proximity. So I signed this call in simply to enable this committee to consider it further. And that's all I have to say on that point. Thank you.
Sally? You just make sure that the microphone's on, because I think that otherwise our YouTube people won't hear anything. And I know at least one journo will be watching.
Thank you, Chair. The reason I supported this call-in is that I've been, as you know, a councillor a long time, and I've seen a lot of mistakes. And I'm not sure if this is a mistake or not, but I wanted to make sure it wasn't, because I was involved in the Sixfield problem, and I asked that to go to scrutiny, and there wasn't time for that to go at that time. I asked for scrutiny over the bus station, but that wasn't allowed either. And we have a bus station that is totally inadequate in Northampton, and no coach station. People who dropped at a curbside, which is terrible when you think people visiting the town and they have to trolley their cases down a main road to get to the bus station that's there. The reason as well with this is we have hundreds of pubs and clubs and places shutting, shops in communities, in rural communities. And it's left to the community there to actually start up a shop or a little business to supply food and fruit and vegetables and things to their community. We don't give them any help. And yet we're going to help a huge conglomerate like this with £2 million, which is said the risks are that we might not get it back. Well, to me, that's too big a risk. That 2 million could help lots of people. And as for the free parking for people in the town, we've just lost one of our best jewellers. Most people I know have used Stefan in their lifetime to buy their engagement ring, their wedding ring, or a present for a loved one. And they closed down because the car parking was too expensive in the town. Nobody went and talked to them and see if they could actually help them stay open. And these are the sort of things we need to be doing, not lending money to people that are only making billions each year in their turnover. We should never have signed the agreement with the Grosvenor to allow them the length of lease they've got, which is absolutely ridiculous in this day and age. And for a peppercorn rent of £2 a year, it just doesn't make sense. And yet they want more money to help support them. This is wrong. This is wrong. And it's the whole point of this is to have a look at it again. We've just spent 1.6 million on the corn exchange. And yet nobody has actually talked to any of the agents that have actually run the big clubs and the things around the country, O2 and various places in Birmingham, to see if they will work with us to supply us with groups and things to come here. So, there isn't a business case to know whether we're going to actually be able to have people that we want to have in the town. Belgrave House has been empty for how many years now? Can somebody refresh me? Maybe Simon can refresh me how many years Belgrave House has been empty? Okay, can he tell me what time, how long? It's been a long time it's been empty and left to go. And I appreciate we've got to do something, but I just don't believe that we have any micro shops coming along. In Northampton now, when I talk to people, they go to Milton Keynes or Market Harbour to shop. Their bus money to go into town has gone up and to come home when you can buy online without any cost at all. It's very, very difficult for commercial companies these days. And I just don't think it's fair to be helping a big one when there's so many small ones struggling, what they could do with help and assistance. And that's the reason why I think the money could be better spent. Thank you.
So are there any points of clarification that anyone wants to make before I bring in the committee members, portfolio holder or that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of those questions on there, I think micro shops, I think, I think to say that we haven't got any shops coming, I think the biggest, we talk about what people are saying on social media. I think particularly in Northampton, we have a lack of good spaces for people to start businesses in, and bringing something like this forward will help and support those to come forward. People say the rents are too high and all these things, and sorry.
So I should have brought in Ken.
Oh, go, get Ken, and then we'll wrap up.
Can I bring in Ken first? Because although he's a member of the committee, but he's not speaking as a member of the committee. Well, I'm not quite sure what context you're speaking in. So
it's just a question that I've had is reading through the report. Are there any grants available? Because I think, if I remember correctly, that the £2 million that supposedly was going to be a loan was actually could be covered by a grant.
yeah, can you just fire out the questions and we'll get answers then sort of in one package?
Yeah, it's just whether there are any grants available that could substitute the loan.
Stuart's nodding his head in the direction to say no, but Stuart?
Just want me to answer that particular question, Chair. No, and the whole point of the loans is that as a council, it's best use of our money. Had we give a grant, then it's giving money away. What this loan does is ensures that we get that money back. And again, there is a risk analysis within the paper that identifies the all of the options and the mitigations against the making sure that we do get the loan back as well. Again, the point was made, I think, within the presentation many times, as it is in the report. This, in effect, is an in-principle decision by Cabinet that would be subject to significant overview from finance, from legal and from audit to make sure that everything we did and do going forward is acceptable and legal. So again, just to answer Ken's particular question, hopefully that answers that.
It was just making sure that there wasn't any available external grants.
No, that there is no external grants, Councillor Pritchard, no.
Thank you very much, Stuart.
Okay, so,
Thanks, Simon's going to-
sorry.
I think
Simon.
one sort of technical point is worth making, which is there's a lot of discussion about why we're giving money to these people as opposed to the market towns or small traders or whoever. I think a fundamental point the committee needs to grapple with is this is not a kind of free decision of the council. It's not something the council says, oh, we fancy getting H&M into the Grosvenor Centre. The council is responding to a situation which exists. Now, Councillor Beardsworth, I think it was, made a point about whether that deal should have been done or not. I'm not going to comment on that tonight, although I do have a view. But the reality is we have the situation we have. And so the deal which is proposed attempts to, well, it does, unscramble that omelette and put things in the place we need them to be. So there isn't a free choice to say, let's take this money and use it somewhere else. The money, if it's given, will be borrowed. The interest the council pays will be being paid by the borrower. So there's no net cost to the council in any event. And then it is repaid. But it unlocks Belgrave House for us. And that's the key thing which needs to be in people's minds this evening. If we don't do this deal, either the Greyfriars regeneration is rendered immensely difficult, and we cannot bring that asset into practical use, and we sit on a cost every year of trying to maintain a tower block, which we're obliged to maintain and have to maintain for good asset management reasons at a growing cost. So that's the choice which exists, not a choice between simply taking money and putting it somewhere else. It simply isn't a valid or realistic option that exists.
Okay, thank you. So, members of the committee then, have you any questions, comments on what we've heard so far? And David?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, like a number of other people, when this first came to my attention, I sort of, raised an eyebrow to it, and I thought, oh God, what are they up to now? And then when I read the report, I could see a different side to this, a different story altogether. My hostility to the Grosvenor Centre goes back 50-odd years, and I won't bore you with that, but sufficient. If it had been left to me, it never would have been built. But it's been built. It provides a captive market. It disrupted the zoning of the streets in the centre of the town there. It moved the Zone A rental value significantly in at least two parts of the town. What we used to call prime in the regions here no longer became prime in the regional definition of that word. But anyway, as I see it, reading this report here, doing nothing is clearly out of the question. The fact that you've looked at the potential liabilities of keeping this building empty and then discounting it back and coming up with a figure of 3.9 million, that puts it all into perspective. That is the capital value, present value of the liabilities without any major input of growth in those liabilities or any real major works that may be required. And since I've been here this evening, I've heard about how this ties into the redevelopment of the area and how it would have an adverse impact on that redevelopment to leave it as it is. That's another added factor. As far as the risk of repayment of the loans is concerned, measures can be taken, according to that report, to mitigate that risk. Nothing, of course, is certain, but if you can, I mean, risk, after all, it can be measured. And if you are sure that there are adequate mitigating there's adequate mitigation in place, you can reduce that risk to almost approaching a level of certainty. So I'm not too bothered about that. But if I can come back to where I started off, and that's with the Grosvenor Centre itself, we are where we are. It makes a significant contribution to rateable value in the town centre here. And a lot of people do like it. I hate it personally, but you know, I'm one person and there are many others who like it. It's in our interest as a council to make sure that it is a vibrant centre. And anything we can do to keep it fully occupied is going to benefit us directly, or rather benefit the public sector directly, because it will produce a significant rateable value, but it will also benefit the amount of town money spent in the town, the footfall and so on. So all in all, I can only come to the conclusion that the sooner we get this wrapped up and get on with a solution here, the better. And I certainly wouldn't recommend that this committee intervenes or attempts to block that process. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Sam?
I've got a few bits. People can pick as to who wants to respond to what, I suppose. The first bit is I just want an absolute clarification as to what we're actually deciding tonight. I'm pretty sure it's if we approve, it goes on unfettered blah, and if we don't, then it gets bounced back to cabinet, and that's what we're actually deciding on. That's the two, and that's it. Fine. I'd like just a very quick. I think I understand them, but just for absolute clarity, a summary of the exact finances involved from the council's perspective and the timeframes over them. I'd like if and this is maybe a Simon question, if there are any examples that we can point to of a similar sort of situation happening previously in terms of diving in with support for something to try and enhance, etc., when otherwise it might fail. Then a description, if possible, over what the conditions may be for a situation like this to happen again in future. So do we have any sort of guidelines or tests, or is it very much a subjective kind of pick on the individual scenario on its merits, etc.? And then finally, I think going back to the points that some of the other councillors have made that have spoken this evening, the mention of looking at, well, there's all the money going into Northampton, which is potentially great, but actually there's so many examples of pubs shutting or other smaller bits and pieces shutting in the market towns or in the villages, etc. Are there any circumstances where we may consider trying to help support, should there be cases for it, smaller bits and bobs in the market towns and villages of a similar nature to this, but on a smaller scale?
Sorry. Yeah, do you want, yeah? Stuart, Simon? Yeah, of course.
Okay, in terms of financial transactions, there is a £2 million loan to Northampton General Partner Limited in connection with H&M, but the loan is to NGML. That money we will borrow. Whatever interest rate we are charged, we will charge, and after 5 years, it will all have been repaid. There is an identical, effectively structured loan for Wizu, again to Northampton General Partner Limited. I'm trying to abbreviate it, and that's £1 million. So, sorry, I'm sorry, not close enough. Apologies. I'll say that again.
Wizu's the gym.
No, Wizu is the officers. That's
all right. Okay.
So those are the two loans, 2 million and 1 million, both to Northampton General Partner Limited, both to be repaid over 5 years. And say all the interest in and out will match. Then there is, so that's actually not capital. Loans aren't capital, they're just money effectively. It's just, Martin knows more about this than I do, but they come from our cash balances and just pass through it. They're not revenue or capital in that sense. Then there's a 375k capital payment towards the micro shops, and that's the closest thing there is to a genuine cash investment in this entire setup. That's money that goes out the door, and if no micro shop ever opened, it would just be gone. On the other hand, there's reasonable grounds to believe that those micro shops, some of them will come and will occupy and will pay rent, and we get half of that rent. And on the current calculations, we get essentially the money back over those 10 years. Parking arrangement doesn't actually involve any money changing hands. At the moment, there is plenty of space in that car park. So if more people come and park to use the gym, it won't actually cost us anything because we're not getting the income in the first place. Sorry, am I drifting too far from the microphone again? And that's it in terms of the financial transactions.
Just on the payback period then over the 10 years, is that accounting for time value of money at all on the 375, or is it just a rough kind of 375? Is it roughly expected to come back on current?
The payment is, it doesn't allow for time value of money, but it's actually slightly more than 375. So once you balance the two, it's effectively the same.
Councillor Ruman's also asked about other examples of councils investing in town centres, etc. Again, I think you could look at any town centre in the UK at the moment is challenged in terms of vacancy, in terms of footfall, in terms of attracting new investment, etc. What the more successful authorities are doing is making sure they've got a whole toolbox full of different ways of investing. Many of them are investing themselves through lease wraps. That's the council taking a lease and then attracting hotels or shops, etc. And it's more directed, it's more risk to councils in doing that. Councils are also making lots of purchases in terms of regeneration, etc. And I think we've already seen that aspect of what we've done in Northampton in terms of BHS, etc., etc. So there's a whole mix out there, but to keep it viable and successful, I think we've got to have that whole mix available to us in moving these things forward. In particular, the size and scale of Northampton, it's a big town centre. There is lots to the equation, and as was mentioned in the presentation, if you look at the two biggest draws into the town, it's the Market Square, which we've already done a lot of work with. We've obviously got Stack starting on site in September. We've got the Corn Exchange as part of the Greyfriars, etc. And the second one is the Grosvenor Centre. Again, just the investment and the loans that we've put forward there helps bring forward H&M, which are seen on a marketplace, on a high street up there with Primark in terms of attracting footfall. It's a much larger store than we've currently got on Abington Street, and therefore, hopefully the range will be more enticing for people to come. And as I think was mentioned, we are in competition with other towns. So again, it's about making our towns competitive as we go forward. Lots of work starting on site at the moment. And again, it's about keeping that momentum moving forward and that positivity moving forward. The works to the gym isn't just a gym. It's probably one of the largest vacant stores in the town that will now be occupied and that taken over. I think when Sainsbury's moved out, that was quite a hit for the town. Again, getting occupiers in, and that's what the whole mix of town centres needs to be now. It's not just about shopping, it's about experience, it's about a mix of all of those things. And again, we'll be looking at residential coming in as well. So I think it is just that getting the mix and the tools for councils available to make it happen. And what we've got here is something that is almost cost neutral to the council. I say almost because of the £350,000 investment, but that's in an area that has been referenced by the opposition members. You know, we need to see new businesses come in. We need to see retail grow organically, and they will hopefully be the people who fill those larger shops as we go forward. So there are many examples out there. I think you could look at any single town centre in the country and see elements of what we're doing here, but many of them need to go over and above and invest a lot more. So I think actually that's why this is a good deal, because of the level of investment for the outcome is minimal.
Fiona?
Sorry.
So just on the specific of H&M, obviously, so this whole situation has been triggered by H&M saying that they're leaving Abington Street, right? That's how was this actually, what was the initial move on this whole thing?
The whole point of this trigger is, as Simon has pointed out, the Greyfriars investment and the fact that we got ECF, English Cities Fund, and what we've tried to do is make sure that that Greyfriars regeneration is as successful as possible. And now having a building which limited use and potentially no use going forward would be an obstruction to the successful regeneration of that. So that has been the trigger to the deal and the conversations and the negotiations we've had with Grosvenor. So we've been open to making sure we've got good outcomes as a result of that deal. So we've got, I think, win-wins in regard to this as we've gone forward. So yeah, no, the trigger wasn't H&M or any of that deal. It was always focused for the council on the Belgrave House.
And so, apologies if I'm completely ignorant of the history of the whole situation. So, have at any point H&M said we're leaving Abington Street?
I think that
its own thing, yeah.
Yes,
So that is, okay.
I think that is in the general public that they have looked to the stores. The footprint's just too small for them to operate successfully, and that's the challenge of all towns: getting footprints, size of stores that are fit the modern retailers' requirements. Yeah.
And so is that's it's H&M saying we still want to be in Northampton, we don't want to leave it. They're not.
It's them saying if we had the right floor plate to become successful, we would stay. So and this is us ensuring that happens, because obviously you can't just move in the next day. There is a fit out, there is a cost to that move. So we're retaining that or enabling the retention of that particular name and enhancing their draw to the public. And as members have mentioned, that means more footfall or more sustainability of footfall as we go forward.
But in any case, they didn't feel the use of their own capital was worthwhile in doing it off their own back.
This isn't unusual when retailers are looking to move in, especially with a Primark or a H&M or that sort of size. Even with some of the more well-known food and drink areas, they would expect, as part of the enticement into a town centre, some sort of incentives to be put into place. So the Grosvenor will be footing that bill, but we are facilitating that through a loan.
Okay, thank you.
Fiona? Can you turn on your mic, please?
I'm in complete agreement that doing nothing isn't an option. We've got a declining town centre and something needs to happen. I guess the question is what? And do I feel that this overall is necessarily right? In part, yes, and in part, no. We're talking about 2.375 million. These are the sums that we've been talking about tonight, yes? But from what we're looking at here, appears to be the proposed plans. That feels like a very light sum. So is this just the initial figure? And then when we've got refits on top of that and various things, if you look at, for example, 5.25, and sorry, there's going to be, I'll say a number of things. There's going to be a number of questions and points of discussion within it. WNC has entered into a construction contract for works which will enable at least one floor of Belgrave House to be brought into productive use. And that contract is substantially underway. So that's just one floor of how many? And so you look at this and say, well, is this just sort of touching the surface of it? That then over the next 10 years, there's going to be another £40 million of investment required. And so this is what I'm saying, that, you know, doing nothing isn't an option. But I feel that we're only scratching the surface with this, that we're not actually looking at the longer term plan. And I think that's where my concern lies generally with the town centre, because we're looking at it piecemeal, not as an overall master plan of what is going on. And that actually gives me grave concerns, because we're talking about sums of 2.375, sorry. Oh, so 3.375, oh, with the extra million.
Yeah.
Which isn't actually a true reflection.
No.
By any stretch of the imagination of what it's actually going to cost to develop this. So I actually feel in general that we're actually having the wrong conversation.
So,
Yeah.
well,
Well, and
can I,
following on from that, yeah, I've got a number of points broadly similar to what Fiona's coming from and some of the others here. So where I'm struggling with a lot of this is the way in which it's being put together. And when you read the cabinet recommendations and read some of what we see within this and then listen to the presentation, a lot of these things begin to contradict each other.
Yeah.
And the story seems to shift around depending on what it is you want to try and get past. And the recommendations to cabinet are almost like algebra, because we, in the report, say these are distinct and separate agreements. Agreed? And then we say, but they're actually all linked. Because recommendation 1.1 says, approve into the agreement A and or F. 2 then says, provided A and F are entered into, we go into D. So A plus F equals D. Subject to agreement of the Executive Director for Finance, agreements A and F are entered into. So A and F equals B, C, and E. So that's why I say it's almost like algebra. But so they are all linked and conditioned upon each other, although I do appreciate that some of them do say that if something doesn't happen within 3 years, then that'll fall away and whatever. So that's one of the things where in saying these are not linked is being disingenuous. Agreement A is just a letter that says, well, there isn't a problem with sticking solar panels on the roof. There's only a problem with sticking solar panels on the roof if you don't give us money, which people can make their own view about that as an approach. Agreement B, however, is the H&M one, which is where I do have a bit of an issue. And despite being told that the only people that we are giving money to is NGPL, correct, Simon?
Chairman, the only people we're proposing to lend money to is NGPL. Correct?
NGPL. Then why does this report on page 19 say that we will loan 2 million for the landlord's work and a capital contribution to the tenant? The tenant is H&M. So H&M are benefiting directly from the 2 million via a pass-through from NGPL. So there's little point in trying to deny that, because that's what the report says, or else the report's wrong. That's what I'm trying to get to. It then also says, provisions are included to allow WNC to make payment directly to H&M or NGPL. So you cannot sit there and say the only person who's going to benefit, or the only entity that's going to benefit here is NGPL. The report is explicit that there is a provision to pay H&M directly or indirectly.
Chairman, if I might, firstly dealing with the algebra point, the report is really clear that the first and last agreements are the ones that are fundamentally in our favour.
Yes.
Which is why it's perfectly acceptable to enter into those without the others. Yeah. The others, the ones in between, are more in favour of Evolve, NGPL. So we will only enter into those if we get the ones that we want. Yeah, that's what that algebra.
But then 3.1 shouldn't give you an or option, because it says enter into agreement A and or F.
Correct.
But the one below says A and F.
And that's quite correct as
So-
written. Let me explain, Chair. Yeah. It's fine for us to have A or F, both of them in our interests. And if for some reason they offer us A or F freestanding, we take it because it's in our favour.
Yes.
Yeah? But we have to have both of them in place in order to unlock the others, which are in their favour. What we're saying is if you give us what we want, we will give you what you want. It's a deal. Yeah. So the wording is correct and logical. I appreciate it's relatively complicated, but it is set out quite deliberately
Not sure it's
in that
logical.
way. If I turn to the question of who gets the money, I will absolutely hold to the line that the loans are to NGPL. They're the ones liable to repay the money. That's what makes it a loan.
So why do we need a provision that will allow WNC to make payment directly to H&M?
Because, as I mentioned earlier, there is a history in this part of the world of money paid to one party intended to end up in the hands of a third party, but didn't. Yeah? So we have access to the terms of the deal between H&M and NGPL. So we know when the money is due to be paid. And if we choose to do so, in order to make sure the money which needs to be paid in order for this deal to go through ends up in the right hands, we can pay it directly, legally speaking, as the agents of NGPL, but that doesn't matter. The arrangements are carefully put together to protect the council's interests. They've not been unlightly or carelessly. And some of the complexity that members are struggling with comes from that need to carefully structure the arrangements so that they look after the council's interests as well as they possibly can.
So the capital contribution, so the NGPL agreement with H&M, I don't know what's in it, but it'll probably say rent-free for 6 months, or it'll probably say we'll give you X 100,000 towards the fit out of the shop,
Exactly
or whatever.
Exactly so.
That's the standard sort of thing, I think, between landlord and tenant. But does it say, and you must keep the shop open for X years? Because we're saying that the micro shops have to be there for 10 years. Does that kind of thing apply? Because we could do it and then a year in say, nah, we're going off to somewhere else.
Not a year in, but there certainly are a number of break clauses. That's the nature of retailing at the moment. So H&M could go, that's perfectly true, but that doesn't put our loan at risk because the loan is not to H&M, the loan is to NGPL.
Right, okay. So the Wizzy one then is for £1 million, which is to do presumably the upper floors of Belgrade House.
Not Belgrave House, no. This is the Northampton Chambers. It is described in the report. It's the upper floors of the main shopping centre, effectively.
Right, okay. So the leisure centre parking agreement, people can take a view on that. I'm not that bothered about free parking. I'm a big fan of it. So I'm happy to do that. And the micro shops agreement, I think, is the best part of this, where it does allow people that might want to turn a hobby business into a proper business and then try and grow that. And after all, you know, people like forgot his name, Jack Cohen started Tesco's that way, I think. So and I think Mr. Sainsbury started Sainsbury's that way too, as market stall holders, and you know, got good. So I don't have a problem with the micro shops. I think that's actually the best part of this deal. It's the lending money at the preferential rate. So even if we're going to NGPL, you know, we're buying money from Public Works Loan Board at a rate that a AAA government-backed organisation gets, which is may or may not, you know, H&M suspect have got the balance sheet to access money at as good a rate or very close to that rate. I don't know whether NGPL would be able to do it. So like it or not, I still think there's a subsidy of a sort in there that we need to be aware of as a council. The idea from NBC for Belgrade House was key worker. So I think we're now saying, in effect, because of Grenfell, then a tower block with all the fire costs are going to be unviable. But Grenfell was 2017, 14th of June 2017. Day my birthday, so I remember the date. The agreement was entered into a couple of days before NBC ceased to exist. And can I just say for the record, I was the leader of the shadow, and they did not inform the shadow of that agreement, and we should have been informed as a shadow. And there were other plant and property deals going on at the time that I was aware of, but was completely unaware of this one, and I think that's outrageous. But have we thought of actually taking a couple of floors off Belgrade House to go back to the original purpose, to reduce its height and therefore not be as onerous on the height restrictions of tall buildings from the fire point of view that Grenfell or post-Grenfell has imposed on us?
If I may, Chair. Well, for a start, we can't do that at the moment because any structural alterations to the building are not permitted without consent.
Yep.
So changing the lease will be fundamental even to do that, if that's what we wanted to do. In practice, the analysis that's been done suggests that it doesn't really matter what you do. Building residential accommodation above a shopping centre, given, yes, it is the post-Grenfell situation, but it's not just about height. It's also about the nature of how fire spreads. The whole regulatory regime around housing has been, and building in general, has been radically reformed. I think it's debatable, if I'm honest, that the scheme would ever have been viable even pre-Grenfell, but certainly in the current world, it is very, very question. It's not challenging, it's completely unviable. You're talking tens of millions of pounds to the south.
Right. Which, well, that's an interesting observation, that you think the whole purpose of in which the borough entered into their agreement was a pipe dream as well. Okay. Right. So then you come back to what you're saying is that you're stuck with this and this is the best deal we can get. And committee, what do you think? So Fiona's indicating, and so Stuart, but
Just going to come back on Councillor Cole's query, if that's
Yeah,
all right.
thank you. Yeah, because I've got a few other elements as well to go, but yeah. go for it, Stuart.
And quite rightly, Councillor Cole points to the fact that this is a very limited paper, but it's there as a way of allowing the further investment to come forward. So the English City Fund, which is looking to deliver a master plan for that Greyfriars area, of which this will be part, is probably in the region of £500 million in terms of its overall scope and scale. So we've got English City Funds, who is a collaboration between Legal and General, who obviously are a finance investment company. We've got Muse, who's a multinational developer, and Homes England, who obviously brings government grants to the table. That's the partnership that we are now working with to hopefully, and we think with confidence, will bring that whole area forward. So all of this deal that you've got in this paper is to facilitate that and prepare the ground, as it were, in terms of Belgrave House, and to ensure that that can be used and fully utilised, and we get flexibility. And as the chair has just pointed out there, have we looked at flexibility within the current lease? Yes, we have, and we don't have any. And that's exactly why we're needing to bring this paper forward, is to ensure we've got flexibility going forward, to work with those partners in consultation with members and the community to make sure whatever we develop there is got longevity and it's right for the town, not just for what we were thinking 10 years ago or whenever this first thinking was coming around. So the point is, yes, it will cost a hell of a lot more money to regenerate this area, but that is in place and we'll start to see that coming forward. Probably the next paper on that will be in March, which starts to set out those aspirations, etc. There has been the consultation, there has been that partnership, and Cabinet has seen the details of that partnership in the past as well. So hopefully that answers that question in terms of context.
Thank you. No, it answers it in terms of context. I'm just also looking at, and this isn't me being pessimistic, it's just, I've lived here for 26 years. And if we look 23 years ago, when Westcott and Close and sort of down on the waterfront, it was meant to be restaurants, it was meant to be bars, it was meant to be all of this. And we're 23 years on and it's still not done. And I think that we just have to be really careful that, that there are other areas of town where, oh, this is going to happen, and then it doesn't. And how much money are we going to keep spending laying the groundwork for things to then not happen and actually take us forward. This is why I'm saying, and I appreciate, you know, we've got the One West Northampton strategy and that's out for consultation at the moment. But we say here, you know, this is laying the groundwork, and we've got, you've mentioned here some developers that are interested, but what's the overall vision? What is it we actually want to do for Northampton? Because as a councillor, I'm not clear on that. So if I'm not clear on that, the public definitely aren't clear on that. And I just don't want to see us spending 3 million here, 3 million there, 3 million, 4, you know, just to keep paving the way for what? Now I appreciate at the moment we can't do anything with Belgrave House because of the lease. But we need to do something, not nothing. But I think we need to be doing something in a grander scheme of things, because what I'm hearing at the moment, it feels quite speculative. Now, I think with any town centre and regeneration, there has got to be an element that is speculative. And I agree with you, Stuart, it needs to include not just shopping, it needs to include good eateries, it needs to include leisure, etc., etc. But what we're actually seeing here in these proposed works doesn't wow me in what the actual proposal is. So I think that we are putting too much emphasis on H&M, when I guess the question I might like to ask is, has any of you actually sat there, had a conversation directly with H&M? Have you? Well, okay, have you actually had a direct conversation yourselves with H&M rather than just what you're hearing through media or anything else?
So colleagues within regeneration have, but
Okay.
I don't think any of us on this table have.
Well,
But
I'd be
yes,
really interested to see the notes of that exact
Yeah,
conversation with H&M. And I think the critical thing in all of this, when we're looking at any expenditure, and the words that we haven't really heard, is return on investment. And that isn't always financial return on investment. It's about the town centre brand. It's about attractiveness. It's about who wants to come here. And I'm not seeing at the moment, the speculative is fine. Very comfortable with the speculative element of any town centre, but it's not feeling particularly evidenced or demand led. And what is the actual return on investment that we're going to be getting?
okay, can I?
Yeah, come back.
Okay,
want to bring it
again, there's a number of questions there in terms of vision and what we're trying to create. Obviously, we've got the Northampton Forward Board. That is a board of businesses from the town centre. They've been looking at creating the vision for the town centre over many years. We've done some branding as part of that, the spirit of independence, the events, the culture, etc. is part of that. Again, through the Greyfriars work and the consultation we've done, we've identified a master plan for that particular area that we're now will do further work on that should respond to that vision that the board has set us as a council to take forward. In terms of some of the speculative nature of this, I think we're in such a fortunate position, if I'm honest, in terms of English City Fund is a government-backed JV partnership. And I believe they're only working in 11 town centres throughout the country. And that just shows how we've set vision out to government and how they've responded to that by them choosing us to come and invest in. We've also got, as well as English City Funds, we've got City Heart. They are the developers of For Waterside. Again, they are about to start on site very shortly. And again, that they're very clear in terms of what's going to be built there. So it'll be the first time for a very long time we've seen Grade A office being built in Northampton town centre. They are proposing to build a 3.5 star. Sorry, I didn't know anything existed in terms of 3.5 stars, but nevertheless, I'm told a 3.5 star hotel as part of that scheme. They're also building new quality apartments, again, using that frontage to the riverside in that particular area. They're about to start working on that as we speak. We've got the development at the railway station again, which is getting very close to coming on site. That will be a new car park, which then frees up the rest of the site. And then we've got housing and hotel and office there.
Sorry to interrupt you, Stuart, because I'm conscious that we're foraying off topic of this one. So
Sorry.
I'm hearing, I know what you're trying to do is you're trying to answer my question about master plan.
So I'm answering the question about scale and whether it's speculative or actual. And what we're seeing is a lot of actual things being about to start or already started on site. In terms of a return on investment, the only investment from the council.
If I say starting 23 years late. But
sorry, and again, I can't comment about the last 23 years, obviously. What I can comment about is the momentum we've gained over the last 3 years, which is incredible. And I would put ourselves against any town centre in the country in terms of the investment, the development, etc., from all of the grants that were given by government. We are the only town centre to be delivering on what we said we would deliver on day one. And that's despite COVID and despite the Ukraine war, which has had a massive increase in costs, etc. We have still got the same projects, so we're delivering the same projects as we said we would at day one. So from an investment size and from a momentum and from an investment, I think we are well ahead of just about any other town centre in the country. And again, I'd put myself against that.
Okay. Fiona?
Okay.
And then Ken. Sorry.
Can we just come back to the return? We'll come back to the return on investment because I think it's a big question. Just to pick up on two things that you've both said. So you actually just said that the board has set us a challenge, and that's fine. You said you've got a number of companies that are on a board that are advising. That's all well and good. Where is the research that says, what do our residents want?
So again, as part of that whole board structure, there has been significant consultation of every step of the way. So when we put in for the funding to government, that was subject to consultation. On the board, there has been residents' reps on there as well. Each scheme has been also consulted on. So the whole vision was a consultation. The schemes were then consulted on. And the English Cities Fund, before we went to do that master plan, and again, we got some of the best master planners in the country because of their links to Northampton. Again, that was fully consulted on using the bid. So the businesses were involved as well as residents and members, etc., as well as groups involved in that.
Would it be possible to provide this committee with just the consultation name along the way and the headlines of the outcomes of those consultations with the public?
We did that presentation to the place Scrutiny a number of, well, I think it was about 2 years ago now, but we'll happily share that to all members.
Well, if it's PowerPoint that's already done, then it should.
100%. It would be quite easy for us to put that together, update it and put it together to bring forward. Yeah.
Thank you. And sorry, just one more question. And it was with regard to the 1 million. And your comment was, no, that's to pay for the upper floors of the Grosvenor Centre. What's 1 million going to pay for on the upper floors of the Grosvenor Centre?
Carpet. Carpet.
It will pay for a degree of fit out. It's a simple answer.
It'll pay for, sorry?
A degree of fit out. It won't pay for it all. And that's fine. It's with the nature of the commercial deal.
So what is that allocated to? Where's the 1 million come from? Because if you're saying it's a degree of it, has it been calculated that it's going to pay for 10% or that's 50% or?
It's probably around 50%, but it's not actually our problem. Ultimately, that's for NGPL to deliver. If they don't deliver it, they don't get a penny. So that one of the beauties of this arrangement is if they don't deliver, none of this money goes out the door at all. It's very different from many of the other things we've been involved in. These are loans, but they're only loans that are payable if they deliver. And likewise with the 375k capital investment Microsoft, only if they deliver, and they have to spend their money first as well. Can I just clarify one other issue, Councillor Cole, which you mentioned one floor of the Grosvenor, of the Belgrave House.
It said, I think it said at a minimum, or at least, I think was the actual wording.
Again, this is a feature of the complexity of these arrangements, which I think is causing some confusion. that is the requirement for us to trigger the drawdown of the new lease. And I wanted that to be minimised because I want to give the council the least exposure possible to any obligation or risk. So they wanted us ideally to commit to fit out the entire space before giving us the new lease. I didn't want to give them that, and we ended up committing simply to fit out one floor. Now, of course, it doesn't mean we're only going to do one floor, but it just means in order to get the benefit, the new lease with all the extensions and everything else on it, all we have to do is get one floor into
Okay,
operation.
and understand that. But what does fit out mean? Fit out with what?
Fit out is what you do when you equip a building. So
No.
if-
I know what it is, but with what? For what?
sorry, I'm not quite.
Fit it out ready for what?
It's a number of office schemes that where you can just go and basically it's thank you. No worries.
Well, Martin wants to come in, and then Ken. I haven't forgotten about you, Ken. I know you're there. So bring in Martin and then Ken.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to reinforce a couple of points that Stuart and Simon have made so far, particularly in relation to the loans, the £3 million worth of loans. So that's what I'm going to make reference to now. The decision we got from Cabinet was agreement in principle. And all the way through the report, it talks about subject to due diligence and adequate security. That hasn't taken place yet. So the assurance that I can give the committee is we'll be crawling all over these agreements. We'll be making sure proper due diligence is carried out. We'll be making sure proper security is in place. And we'll also pick up the issue about subsidy control, which has been raised this evening. Previously referred to as state aid, but the new regime of that is subsidy control. So we'll make sure that we look at all of that as well. In terms of net cost of loans to the council, subject to that due diligence, subject to those loans going ahead, we would go to the PWLB, we would get the loans, they'd be paid into our bank account. Likely we would pay them out on the same day, and we would passport the same amount of interest on. So there would be no impact on our cash flow. There'd be no impact on the amount that we're paying for those loans. So it's important to highlight that. What that does for us as an authority, so the returns that we get, is it cleans up the restrictive covenants that we've got. We were landed with those as an authority. We need to get out of those. We need to try and make Belgrave House as useful as possible, and it cleans that up for us. And it's good for the town centre. So for all of those reasons, that's why I support this paper, but it is subject to that due diligence that's still due to take place.
So I appreciate that the people are different, but what reassurances can this council give the residents that a set of council employees entered into a set of arrangements with financial and legal consequences, and now we're saying a few years later, actually, they were a bunch of clowns and they didn't know what they were talking about, and these arrangements that they entered into were all rubbish and need to be redone. So I appreciate it wasn't anybody in the room, but the general public are probably not drawing that distinction as clearly as I'm attempting to. So they just say councils are rubbish at doing this sort of stuff. How do we give any assurance that they're not rubbish at doing it? And trust me, Governor, we're going to get it right this time.
Chair, I think around the table you've got really diligent and conscientious officers, and we'll do our utmost to protect the interests of the council going forward. That's the assurance and undertaking we can give this committee and the residents.
If I may, Chair, I'll just add, I think also you need to look at the substance of the agreements. They are very different in substance to the ones I think you were alluding to, the original lease. You may have others in mind as well. But the way they are structured is designed to greatly reduce and minimise the risk the council faces in a way that was clearly not done in some of the other agreements you may have in mind. So I think, yes, absolutely, I stand with Martin's assurance, but also look at the substance of what is proposed.
Okay, Ken?
Thank you very much, Chairman. If I may state that I'm speaking on behalf of, as a councillor and not a committee member. When you consider that Officer Bowers has actually put forward his responses to some of the calling questions, I think I'm very confident that we don't really have any option but to go ahead with this particular project. The only questions that I have is, first of all, is with regards to H&M. How long are they committed to actually carry on with the new store? You said, oh, it can be a relatively short period, but what is it? Okay, you know, the £3 million, obviously, they would have to pay back. But having said that, £3 million to H&M is a spit in the ocean. But when you think of it, if they actually pulled out of the Grosvenor Centre, it would reduce the footfall quite significantly. When you look at the situation with regards to the redevelopment of Northampton Town Centre, I think, as one of my colleagues said earlier, it's very, very much piecemeal. You know, you've got projects all over the place, but the thing is also is that we do not have what I classify as a vision statement. And perhaps I can look at things like Milton Keynes 2050 vision. Okay, I appreciate from their perspective that, you know, it's pie in the sky, but they've actually sat down and thought what they really want their city to actually do. But I think that we have to look very, very closely indeed with all of these projects to ensure that it fits into perhaps a 20 or 30-year vision, that all these elements can come together. When you look at the Greyfriars, you know, I can remember 10 years ago when the bus station was there, you know, it's now virtually a bomb site for the last 10 years. And obviously I would like to see that go ahead, but at the same token, it's got to fit in with any of the other developments that we actually go ahead with. But once again, I don't think we have any option but to go ahead and, shall we say, override the call-in that my colleagues have actually put forward.
Okay. So, sorry, David, quickly.
Yes, I echo Ken's words there that, you know, we haven't really got an option. We have to do something. One of the things that a lot of people don't understand about real estate is that obsolescence is a big factor and it often gets ignored. You can have economic obsolescence, environmental obsolescence, and physical obsolescence. And in Northampton here, we've seen examples of this in the past. We saw it with the Emporium Arcade on the Market Square. We saw it with the original 1961 Peacock Way going to the Market Square. And we saw it with the Car Parkade. And you wouldn't have to go far from here, many miles from here, to a town where they're also faced with a shopping centre that's beginning to look very pitiful and shabby, and something's going to have to be done. And I come back to what I said originally. You know, we have the Grosvenor Centre and the adjoining properties there. We have development plans and proposals for the adjoining sites and land. We're stuck with that, and we've got to make the best of it. And we've got to keep what we've got and keep it in good condition and deal with the environmental obsolescence that we're faced with at the moment.
Okay, so I think we're getting to a point where we now need to sort of draw all this together and make a recommendation. Now, my understanding is we've got, in effect, two options. We can make a recommendation to take no further action, in which instance the cabinet decision will be effective immediately. Or we can go back to cabinet and say, we wish for you to think again and think about and give them things that we wish them to think about. I think, Sarah, that's the two options we have. Yeah. So if we're going with option one, that's relatively straightforward. It's sort of, we are happy, or if not happy, less jarred off, or at least we
better understand the rationale. And the one plea I would be making to Cabinet with these things is that, you know, I suspect a lot of this has come from the fact they've been grappling with these issues for months and years. And what's obvious to them, because they know the detail, is not obvious to those sitting outside the Cabinet circle. And therefore you get that reaction as to what the heck does this all mean? And the kind of discussion that we've had for the last hour and a half and more is the sort of thing that I think if they had spent that time in some sort of all-member discussion or something to bring members up to speed, would have actually prevented some of this type of reaction. So if we wish then to ask Cabinet to think again, we need to give them sensible and coherent reasons on the areas of our concern as a committee. Does anybody have a proposal from the members in the room around which of those two options they wish to go down for a start? And then we can dispense with one and deal with the other.
I would have a preference for option 2. But do those reasons and the areas to look at have to all be given this evening, or can we have a week to reconvene all together to draw it together and then provide those recommendations or areas to look at?
No, I think we would have to say we wish Cabinet to look at, consider. I don't know, like consider the micro loans to be acceptable, but not the HMM part. Reconsider along those lines, or reconsider along the lines of, I don't know, not paying the money directly to H&M. You know, areas of the agreement, as we've heard, that we're uncomfortable with.
Or look at how we could attract, some large retailers back in.
No, I was just going to say that in terms of the next steps, what we're looking for is as you would have in any committee meeting, which is a proposer and a seconder for a particular course of action. So as the chair has clearly outlined for you, you have the option of sending it back to Cabinet for reconsideration. You have the option to take the decision that you're going to take no further action. And so what we're looking for now is a proposer to either of those two options, so that then that can be considered and moved, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, David.
Well, I propose we take no further action.
Do we have a seconder? Yeah.
Is this time sensitive? Is this going to, if this drags on too long, is there a likely pinch point that this could cause?
Chair, it is reasonably time sensitive. Yeah, the H&M element in particular, it is running on a reasonably tight time frame now. If we delay it too long, potentially the whole thing falls over because they no longer have the incentive to act, and that would be unfortunate.
What is that time limit?
That is hard to do. I appreciate that feels like I'm not giving a very clear answer, but that's just the nature of these things. We're working on the legals now. We need to be able to interview it within a few weeks, really, if we can.
Sorry.
Have you got a button down there? I think the other time constraint on this is obviously we're moving towards pre-election period where there will be no cabinets. So we are getting tight on cabinet time if you wanted to take this back. So I think from not just on an individual deal basis, but if we extended this any longer, then I think there is confidence from our other partners, ECF, in terms of our decision making, et cetera, et cetera. So we have obviously been in negotiations with ECF and other parties as to what our vision is, what the opportunities are, and what some of the risks are. And Belgrave House is a risk to Greyfriars, a risk we hoped and believed we would be able to resolve through this paper. So there is confidence, but I would point to the pre-election which I think is the 14th of March. So I think any longer in terms of this discussion would start to impact on when we'd be able to get it back to Cabinet, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you for that. So do we have a seconder for the no further action proposition? I'll say that's a no then. So do we have an additional proposition, Fiona, to refer back to Cabinet to look at? So do we have a seconder for a referral back?
To do what though?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm struggling here. Yes. Yeah, so I need a seconder for referral back. And then the reasons for referral, what we wish Cabinet to reconsider, because we would have to say to them, we want you to, I don't know, not enter into Agreement A or something similar. I'm not saying that is what we do, because that's probably the worst of that's the most stupid idea, because that's the only one that works. But anyway, it's an idea. So do we have this is the problem of having struck everybody else off the committee, that we can't actually now, we got to a point where we're unviable. Sorry, Sam.
Can I ask you, Chair, do you have a particular view or what would be your strongest reservations of either course of action?
My strongest course of action, and then it's said that wouldn't be
Strongest
covered
reservations of either.
by due diligence, by DD. My concerns are that we get all these reassurances about DD and we've got great officers and we can do this and we can do that. And then we find out 3, 5 years, 7 years later that actually these great agreements that we had, the lessons can be identified, but they're never learned. So that's what I want to try to avoid. And that's always my concern. I absolutely with you, Fiona, in terms of a vision. I've been saying it for a long time. I cannot see at times what brings all these things together, other than one thing, that every single plot the council buys has got a problem.
Sorry,
I'm just going to, sorry if I may just come in, just on the points that we've made around due diligence and perhaps drawing a distinction between previous decisions that have been made and the proposal that is being made this evening, is that you have the involvement of statutory officers. And I don't know whether they were involved previously, but obviously there are additional responsibilities and liabilities that sit with statutory officers. Well, there are in terms of those appointments. And I know that the statutory officers at West Northants take that responsibility very seriously in terms of considering those options. I don't know whether that provides any additional reassurance.
What about if the statutory officers aren't with West Northants at the time that this all comes to fruition?
But the point I'm making is that the decision to enter into any agreements is subject to the consent of the statutory officers. That's what I'm saying. So obviously there is that additional level of reassurance. I'm not sure whether that helps members, but I think it is worth drawing that distinction at this point.
Thank you, Sarah. So actually, just in terms of this due diligence, you're saying we've literally got a couple of weeks in order to essentially secure H&M. I'm summarising and paraphrasing, but that's essentially what you're saying. But yeah, how long is the due diligence going to take? Because I would imagine that that's going to take longer than this couple of weeks that you've got to secure H&M. So it feels a bit of a moot point.
Yeah, well, I'd be surprised if there hasn't already been a fair amount of DD done to get to
I
this
don't know. I mean, Martin, you said that the due diligence and the security process is now got to be fully looked into and hasn't been done yet. So I'm just picking up.
We're asking for things like parent company guarantee. Have we got any indication that we will get a parent company guarantee?
It's been offered, so that's not a problem.
Pardon?
It's been offered, so it's not a problem.
Okay. And the parent company is worthy?
Sorry, second.
The parent company is actually worth?
The parent company has a capitalisation of a couple of billion, so yes.
Okay.
I said a few weeks, not 2, which does make a difference. But fundamentally, we will not enter into the legal agreement until, in particular, Martin is content that it is properly and thoroughly vetted.
Okay, but if we have a few weeks for H&M decision, and potentially due diligence is going to take 2 weeks, or is it going to take 8 weeks?
Yeah, I think we need to be careful about the decision-making timeline. So
Yes and no.
we
because we're
need
kind of,
to,
I feel to
we
some
need to
extent
say
being pushed
something to
into
get it
a-
back to February cabinet, I suspect, because
Yes,
PERDA would,
Yes.
remember the rules of PERDA, as I understand them, is you don't make a decision that could prove controversial or might influence how people might vote.
Yeah.
Arguably, this type of thing, do we lend a couple of 3 million quid to this lot, falls firmly and squarely within that. They're only doing that to get votes or not votes, or I'll oppose it, I'll support it in a political context. So absolutely that type of decision can't be taken in PERDA. It would be my view. I'm sure Sarah will disagree or agree, but I would have thought that's not an each way bet. It's a definite falls that side of the line. It'll just have to wait till the election's out of the way. So if we miss February cabinet, I suspect we're going to be stuck till June.
Yeah.
And that would be probably council's. So I do think we have to make a decision one way or the other. Either we're going back to cabinet or we're not going to do it. Wendy's waving at me. Do you want to say something quickly? But come to the mic, please, because otherwise you won't be heard on the broadcast.
Sorry, I'm just going to say, why can't you call an extraordinary cabinet meeting to make sure it fits in with that timescale?
There's ways and means of this if they wanted to do that, but nonetheless, that's getting beyond us. But March is going to be darn close to the 14th of May. On the cabinet's normally, I don't know the exact date, but cabinet's normally the low teens, 11th, 12th, 13th is normally the date of cabinet. But I don't know. Of course you crack on.
Thank you, thank you. It was just to clarify the point around the due diligence. So the due diligence will happen. What we're interested right now is the decision. So that will happen afterwards. It's not truncated in the same way. So we don't need to apply the same timescales with regards to when that occurs, if you like. What we need to make sure happens is a decision in relation to this particular matter and whether it is either going back to cabinet or whether it is going to it's going to be allowed with no further action, etc. The due diligence will happen after the event and isn't caught in the same way by the decision that you're trying to make this evening. Does that help?
Yes, it helps understand, but then we could be in a position where entering into agreements with H&M, which then potentially we have to renege on because we don't pass due diligence. Is that a acceptable scenario?
No, because the decision that cabinet took was to grant the authority for a decision to be taken subject to that due diligence. So, so if you allow the decision to continue as it is currently, none of that changes. It is still the case that that due diligence has to happen before. It's just around, it may be slightly delayed whilst obviously we've been through this process, etc. But there isn't, it won't be caught in the same way in that sense.
Thank you.
David, so
thank you, Chair.
After that, do we have a seconder for either of those two propositions? Because I'm still, we can't move forward here. We are hampered now. The fact we've only got 3 members from one party, and I do need one.
Can I say anything at the minute, Chair? I think what we've got to remember is this is a small loan to a big company who are going to be paying it back with security that is enabling a very, very big development. We've got the ECF on the table who want to put millions of pounds into the Greyfriars scheme, that we are at risk of a council making ourselves look like we're incapable of making sound decisions when we've got a very small investment that's going to be paid back, that's enabling H&M, Wizoo, Jim, it's enabling all of these other things to come forward, but most importantly, unlocks Belgrave House because that brings forward the Greyfriars scheme.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, and we've got to be sensible about this.
And I think I accept everything you have to say, except history's not on your side. And I don't want to say much more than that because there's an active court case that we all know about. So, Sam.
In terms of the scope of the due diligence and our ability to then subsequently turn down any deal, where do we stand as a council? So can cabinet subsequently turn around and go, oh, actually, no, we don't want to go ahead with this because of blah, 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 blah. Other than it'll be like what's the scope of them being able to say no? Have we defined the due diligence really specifically, or
the cabinet decision normally will delegate? It delegates Martin Director of Assets and Environment, that's Simon, and Martin, to satisfy themselves that they're happy presumably after consultation with Malcolm and maybe yourself, I don't know, but that would be the normal thing. So, you know, if during the course of this, Martin discovers something he's unhappy with and says, I'm not entering into an agreement with these characters, then that would probably put the kibosh on things. But it might not go back to cabinet. It wouldn't have to, I don't think, in terms of this. It's saying cabinet are happy with it. They've set the direction. Officers get on in the grade, and we've had this many times. I think the big problem, as I see it, is just that confidence that we can give the general public that we're not going to be sitting here in a few years' time, like Belgrade House, saying that agreement was rubbish. Who the hell entered into that? And the people who did enter into it are not too far away. They just don't happen to be in this room tonight. But and that's the annoying thing. And then other ones that we know about, I don't want to mention too much because I just don't want to break the law. But contempt of court's a bit of a big problem. So I'm not going down there. So that's all I'm concerned about. I'm being deliberately careful as to what I'm saying there. So we now need to move forward as a committee here. We either make a decision to accept that we do nothing, or accept that we want to ask Cabinet to look at particular bits of this agreement that we're not happy with. So those are our two options. They haven't changed. We have a proposal for both, but we haven't had a seconder for either. So I need to move this forward.
Chair, I think we're in danger of unnecessarily complicating this, and we're forgetting that we've had a figure of, I think it was 3.9 million, being the discounted future liabilities, the present value of the future liabilities, if we do nothing at all. And if we continue like this, we could end up delaying and losing this proposal and paying out for no return whatsoever. So that's the big danger here.
I take your point. I want to, Sam, do you want to come back in?
I'm just going to chuck it back at Fiona and say, if there's something that we're going to pass it back to Cabinet on the basis of, what would it actually be? Because the problem I'm having is I could sort of look at bits and go, we can ask a bit about terms of this and something that there's a bit, but ultimately we could call in so many different decisions that council makes on the basis of stuff that's in here roughly, and chuck it back at Cabinet. And I'm struggling to, are we talking about one specific decision, or actually are we having a more fundamental conversation about the basis of loads of decisions here?
So as we said, A and, I need my glasses on, A and F, we're saying more benefit us. B, C, D, E, more benefit evolve. That's what we're saying, isn't it? And it's about, is there not a way of unlocking Belgrave House, because I agree, without any of these other elements? And that's because Evolve are digging their heels in.
If I may, Chair, Evolve are decent in my experience, but they are highly commercial. They will get their pound of flesh for any benefit any other party takes in a transaction. That's what they're in business to do. There's no dishonor in that. But that is the reality of the situation. If we want Belgrave House freed up, we need to agree the other deals. And equally, I don't think you just add them up and say, well, there's 2 and 4. We're getting a lot of benefit from freeing up Belgrave House.
Sorry, we're getting a lot of
benefit.
Well, I think you've summarised it properly, and I think that's the concern, that we're the minnows swimming in a sea of sharks. So I'm going to second one of these 2 propositions so we can move to a vote, because I don't think the members are going to do it. So I'm going to second that we take no further action, because I just think if we even go back to Cabinet, they'll throw it out in any event. So, but that's not because I necessarily support that. I just now need to move things to a vote. So we've got a proposition that's proposed and seconded. So those in favour of taking no further action? Those against? Any abstentions? Sorry, Ken can't vote because he's not in person. There's only one, two, three. Sorry, David, Fiona, Sam, and myself are the only people who can vote, because we've had other issues with striking numerous people from being able to sit on the committee, which is also another lesson that we need to learn from this. So that's carried then in two votes in favour, which also seems very unsatisfactory. But nonetheless, that's the decision, that we'll take no further action, and the cabinet decision will now be effective. So Simon and Martin can get to work on it first thing in the morning. So thank you for your time. I don't think we've there is no other business. I'll close the meeting at 8 o'clock.